The laughter echoed through the small courthouse like daggers piercing Simone Davis's heart. Her sisters Denise and Rochelle couldn't contain their amusement as the lawyer read their grandmother's will aloud, their voices carrying over the hushed courtroom. And to my youngest granddaughter, Simone Davis, I leave my 500 acres of land in the eastern desert, Attorney Morrison announced, adjusting his glasses as he continued reading from the weathered document. 500 acres of rocks and sand. Denise whispered loudly to Rochelle, not bothering to lower her voice. Grandma Eleanor must have really been losing her mind at the end. Rochelle smirked, flipping her perfectly straightened hair over her shoulder. Poor Simone gets the wasteland while we get the house and the savings accounts. I guess we know who the favorite grandchildren really were. Simone sat in the back row, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. The courthouse felt suffocating, filled with extended family members who had shown up to witness the reading of Eleanor Davis's will. Her grandmother had been the backbone of their family for decades, the woman who raised them after their parents died in a car accident when Simone was just 8 years old. The property is located approximately 60 miles east of town, near Sunset Ridge, the attorney continued, his voice droning on as if he were discussing the weather rather than dividing up a beloved woman's life possessions. Miss Davis, you'll need to sign these documents to take ownership. As Simone walked to the front of the courtroom on shaking legs, the whispers grew louder. Cousin after cousin shook their heads, some with pity, others with barely concealed satisfaction that they hadn't been stuck with the worthless land. That poor child, she heard Aunt Ruby mutter. Eleanor Dunn left her nothing but dirt and tumbleweeds. What's she supposed to do with desert land? She can't even afford to pay the property taxes on something like that. Denise stood up dramatically, her designer heels clicking against the wooden floor. Simone, honey, if you want to sell that land for whatever you can get, Rochelle and I would be happy to help you find a buyer. I mean, as your older sisters, we feel responsible for making sure you don't get taken advantage of. Though honestly, Rochelle added with false sympathy, I can't imagine anyone wanting to buy desert land that far out. You might have to pay someone to take it off your hands. The courtroom erupted in more laughter. Simone felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and grief. Her grandmother had been gone for only 2 weeks, and already her family was treating Eleanor's final wishes like a cruel joke. The woman who had loved them unconditionally, who had worked 2 jobs to put food on the table and keep them in school, was being mocked in death. Simone signed the documents with a heavy heart, her signature barely legible through her tears. As she walked out of the courthouse, she could hear her sisters planning how they would divide their grandmother's house and bank accounts, discussing real estate values and investment opportunities as if they were talking about stocks rather than the home where they had all grown up. Pastor James Franklin caught up with her in the parking lot, his kind face creased with concern. He had been Eleanor's pastor for over 30 years and had watched the Davis girls grow up in his congregation. Simone, child, don't let their words poison your heart, he said gently, placing a fatherly hand on her shoulder. Your grandmother was a wise woman. She didn't do anything without purpose. But Pastor Franklin, what am I supposed to do with 500 acres of desert? Simone asked, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I teach elementary school. I can barely afford my apartment rent. How am I going to pay property taxes on land I can't even use? Maybe the question isn't what you're supposed to do with it, Pastor Franklin replied thoughtfully. Maybe the question is what it's supposed to do for you. That night, Simone sat in her small apartment, staring at the legal documents that made her the owner of what everyone considered worthless land. She pulled out an old photo album and found pictures of her grandmother from decades past, including some taken during family trips to various parts of Nevada when Simone was a child. As she flipped through the pages, she found a letter tucked between the photos, written in her grandmother's careful handwriting. The envelope was addressed simply, "For Simone when you need answers." With trembling fingers, she opened the letter and began to read. My dearest Simone, if you're reading this, then I'm already with the Lord and you've just inherited what your sisters and the rest of the family think is worthless land. They don't understand what I'm giving you because they never took the time to really listen to the old stories. But you did, baby girl. You always did. That land has been in our family for over a century. Your great-great-grandfather bought it from a prospector who needed money to get back east. The man told him it was cursed land, that nothing good would ever come from it. But your ancestor didn't believe in curses. He believed in possibilities. I'm not leaving you dirt and rocks, Simone. I'm leaving you a legacy that goes deeper than anything your sisters could understand. Take some time to visit the land. Walk it with your heart open and your eyes sharp. Remember the stories I used to tell you about our family's history. And remember this, sometimes what looks like a burden is actually a blessing in disguise. Sometimes the thing everyone else throws away is the very thing that will change your life forever. Trust in God, trust in yourself, and trust that I knew exactly what I was doing when I left you this inheritance. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. P.S. Look for the old oak tree near the eastern boundary. There's something there you need to see. Simone read the letter 3 more times before finally setting it down. Her grandmother's words filled her with a mixture of hope and confusion. What legacy could possibly exist in the middle of the desert? What was she supposed to find at an old oak tree? As she prepared for bed, Simone made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow was Saturday, and she would drive out to see her inheritance for herself. Whatever secrets the land held, she was going to uncover them. The last thing she heard before falling asleep was the echo of her sister's laughter from the courthouse, and the last thing she felt was a determination growing in her chest like a flame that refused to be extinguished. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the desert as Simone's aging Honda Civic bumped along the dirt road leading to her inherited land. She had left town before dawn, armed with bottled water, snacks, her grandmother's letter, and a folded map that looked like it had been drawn by hand decades ago. The landscape was more beautiful than she had expected. Instead of the barren wasteland her sisters had described, Simone saw rolling hills dotted with hardy desert plants, ancient rock formations that looked like sculptures, and mountains in the distance that seemed to touch the sky. The silence was profound, broken only by the sound of wind whistling through the brush and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. After driving for what felt like hours on increasingly rough roads, she finally reached a weathered wooden sign that read, Davis Land Private Property. Her heart skipped a beat seeing her family name on the sign, realizing that her grandmother must have put it there years ago. Simone parked the car and stepped out, immediately feeling the dry desert air fill her lungs. The land stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast expanse that seemed both intimidating and oddly welcoming. She pulled out her grandmother's letter and reread the part about finding the old oak tree near the eastern boundary. Using the hand-drawn map as a guide, she began walking east, her sneakers crunching on the sandy soil. As she walked, she found herself thinking about all the times her grandmother had told stories about their family's history, tales that had seemed like folklore but now felt more significant. Eleanor had always insisted that their family was descended from strong people, survivors who had overcome impossible odds. She talked about ancestors who had been enslaved but found ways to buy their freedom, about great-grandparents who had migrated west when black families weren't welcome in most places, about relatives who had built businesses and communities from nothing. "We come from people who knew how to see possibility where others saw only problems," Eleanor used to say. "That's in your blood, baby girl. Don't ever forget that." After walking for almost an hour, Simone spotted something unexpected on the horizon, a large, gnarled oak tree standing alone in what should have been purely desert terrain. As she got closer, she realized the tree was enormous, probably centuries old, its thick trunk and sprawling branches creating a natural shelter in the harsh landscape. When she reached the tree, she was amazed to discover that it sat at the center of what appeared to be a natural spring. Water bubbled up from underground, creating a small oasis that supported not just the oak tree but also various other plants and grasses. The sight took her breath away. It was like finding a hidden garden in the middle of nowhere. She sat down in the shade of the ancient tree and pulled out her grandmother's letter again, studying every word. "Look for the old oak tree near the eastern boundary. There's something there you need to see." Simone walked around the base of the tree, running her hands along the bark, searching for anything unusual. That's when she noticed something carved into the trunk, so old and weathered that it was barely visible. She traced the markings with her finger and realized they formed letters, ED 1952, and below that, "The treasure is not always where you expect to find it." Her grandmother had been here. Eleanor Davis had carved this message into the tree over 70 years ago, when she would have been just a young woman. But what treasure was she talking about? As Simone continued exploring around the tree, she discovered something that made her heart race. Hidden beneath a large flat stone near the spring, wrapped in oiled cloth, was an old journal. The leather cover was cracked with age, but the pages inside were still readable. The journal belonged to her great-great-grandfather, Samuel Davis, and the first entry was dated 1923. As Simone began reading, she discovered a family history she had never known. "Today I bought 500 acres from a prospector named Collins," Samuel had written in careful script. "He seemed eager to sell, said the land was cursed and would never amount to anything. But Collins doesn't know what I know. My grandmother was Cherokee and she taught me to read the signs in the earth. This land sits on something valuable, something that won't be understood or appreciated for many years to come." Entry after entry revealed Samuel's growing certainty that the land held hidden wealth. He wrote about finding unusual rock formations, about water that tasted different from other springs, about the way certain areas of the ground seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. "I won't live to see this land reveal its secrets," he had written in 1954. "But someday when the world is ready and when our family needs it most, the truth will come to light. I've marked the most promising spots on the map I'm leaving with this journal." Simone's hands shook as she unfolded a detailed map drawn by her great-great-grandfather. The land was divided into sections, with certain areas marked with symbols she didn't understand. But one thing was clear: Samuel Davis had believed there was something valuable buried beneath what everyone else saw as worthless desert. As she sat by the spring reading the journal, Simone heard the sound of an approaching vehicle. A dusty pickup truck was bumping across the desert toward her, and for a moment she felt afraid. She was alone in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone service, and someone was coming straight toward her. The truck stopped near the oak tree and a young black man got out, wearing jeans, work boots, and a University of Nevada t-shirt. He looked surprised to see her. "I'm sorry," he called out as he approached. "I didn't know anyone was here. I'm Tommy Henderson. I'm a graduate student studying desert geology. I've been coming to this spring for months to collect water and soil samples for my research." "This is my land," Simone said, standing up and clutching the journal protectively. "I just inherited it." Tommy's face lit up with excitement. "You're the new owner? That's incredible. Do you realize what you have here? This spring is fed by an underground water system that's probably thousands of years old. And the mineral content is unlike anything I've seen in this region." "What do you mean?" Simone asked, her heart beginning to race. "I mean the water coming up through this spring is carrying minerals from deep underground. Really deep. The kind of depth where you find." Tommy paused, studying her face. "Have you had this land surveyed? Professionally, I mean." "Surveyed for what?" Tommy knelt down and picked up a handful of sand near the spring. "Miss, I don't want to get your hopes up, but the mineral composition in this soil is consistent with areas that contain valuable deposits. Gold, silver, possibly other precious metals." Simone felt dizzy. She sat back down against the oak tree, her mind reeling. "Are you saying there might be gold under this land?" "I'm saying it's possible. Very possible. I've been studying the geological survey maps of this region for my thesis, and this area has never been properly explored for mineral deposits. Most people assumed it was worthless because it's so remote." Tommy sat down across from her, his expression serious. "If you don't mind me asking, how did you inherit this land? Has it been in your family long?" "Over a century," Simone whispered, looking down at the journal in her hands. "And I think my great-great-grandfather suspected something like this." As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and purple, Simone realized that her inheritance might be worth more than anyone could have imagined. But she also realized that discovering the truth would require courage, resources, and allies she didn't yet have. The laughter from the courthouse was still fresh in her memory, but now it carried a different meaning. Her sisters and the rest of the family had laughed because they thought she had inherited nothing of value. They had no idea how wrong they were about to be proven. 3 weeks after her first visit to the land, Simone found herself sitting in the cramped office of Dr. Rebecca Stone, the state's leading geologist. Tommy had helped her arrange the meeting, and the preliminary soil samples they had collected were spread across Dr. Stone's desk like pieces of a puzzle. "Miss Davis," Dr. Stone said, removing her reading glasses and looking directly at Simone with barely contained excitement. "In 30 years of geological survey work, I have rarely seen mineral concentrations like this in surface samples." Simone gripped the arms of her chair, her palms sweating despite the air conditioning. "What exactly are you telling me?" "I'm telling you that your land is sitting on what could be one of the most significant gold deposits discovered in Nevada in decades." Dr. Stone pulled out a detailed report and pointed to highlighted sections. "These trace amounts of gold, silver, and rare earth minerals in your soil samples suggest a substantial underground deposit." Tommy, who had been quietly taking notes in the corner, leaned forward. "How substantial are we talking about?" Dr. Stone consulted her charts again. "Based on these preliminary findings, I would estimate anywhere from $50 million to $200 million worth of extractable minerals, possibly more with deeper exploration." The room went completely silent. Simone felt like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. $200 million. The number was so large it didn't seem real. "However," Dr. Stone continued, "determining the exact scope and value would require extensive surveying, core sampling, and environmental impact studies. That's expensive work. Probably costs upward of $500,000 just to get accurate estimates. Simone's heart sank. She was an elementary school teacher living paycheck to paycheck. She didn't have $500,000. She barely had $1,000 in her savings account. There's something else you need to know, Dr. Stone said, her tone becoming more serious. Word travels fast in the geological community. I've already had 3 different mining companies call me asking about mineral surveys in your area. Someone's been making inquiries. What kind of inquiries? Tommy asked. The kind that suggest other people are becoming interested in your land, Ms. Davis. If word gets out about these mineral deposits before you've secured your legal rights and surveying claims, you could find yourself in a very complicated situation. That evening, Simone drove straight to Pastor Franklin's house. She needed guidance from someone she trusted, someone who had known her grandmother well and could help her make sense of everything that was happening. Pastor Franklin listened carefully as she explained about the geological survey, the potential gold deposits, and the growing interest from mining companies. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time, staring out his kitchen window at the setting sun. You know, he finally said, your grandmother came to see me about 6 months before she passed away. She said she was worried about you, that your sisters didn't understand your value the way she did. She said she was leaving you something that would change your life, but that you'd need wisdom and courage to handle it properly. Did she tell you about the gold? Simone asked. She didn't have to, Pastor Franklin replied. Eleanor was a smart woman who grew up hearing stories from her grandfather about that land. She always suspected there was more to it than met the eye. But she also knew that kind of wealth can destroy a family if it's not handled right. Pastor Franklin got up and retrieved a sealed envelope from his desk drawer. She asked me to give this to you if you ever came to me for guidance about your inheritance. With trembling hands, Simone opened the envelope. Inside was another letter from her grandmother, this one much longer than the first. My precious Simone, the letter began, if Pastor Franklin is giving you this letter, it means you've discovered what I suspected was buried under that desert land. I prayed that God would reveal the truth to you when the time was right, and it seems He has. I want you to understand something important. This inheritance isn't just about money. It's about justice. Our family has struggled for generations, working twice as hard for half as much, watching opportunities pass by because we didn't have the resources or connections that others took for granted. This land represents a chance to change that, not just for you but for your children and their children. But I also want you to be careful. Wealth can bring out the worst in people, including family. Your sisters laughed at your inheritance because they thought it was worthless. When they discover its true value, they will try to claim they deserve a share. They will say I wasn't in my right mind when I made my will. They will try to make you feel guilty for having what they believe should be theirs too. Don't let them. I left them the house and the savings because that's what they valued, immediate, obvious wealth. I left you the land because you're the only one who ever listened to the old stories, the only one who understood that our family's strength comes from our ability to see beyond the surface. Use this blessing wisely. Remember where you come from, but don't be afraid to go where you're meant to be. And remember that the best revenge against those who underestimated you is not to prove them wrong, it's to prove yourself right. All my love and faith in you, Grandma Eleanor. P.S. There's a safety deposit box at First National Bank downtown. Box 247. The key is taped under the drawer of my old sewing table, which I left to you in my will. Inside the box, you'll find additional documents about the land and some resources to help you get started. Simone looked up at Pastor Franklin with tears in her eyes. She knew. She knew all along. Eleanor always knew more than she let on, Pastor Franklin said with a gentle smile. The question now is, what are you going to do with what she's given you? That night, Simone retrieved the key from her grandmother's sewing table and drove to the bank. Inside the safety deposit box, she found geological survey maps from the 1940s, correspondence between her great-great-grandfather and various mining companies, and a cashier's check for $50,000 made out to her name. There was also a note. This should be enough to get you started with the proper surveys. Make sure you own the mineral rights before you tell anyone else what you've found. Trust Tommy, he has a good heart. And remember, they laughed at your inheritance, but God always has the last laugh. As she drove home through the quiet streets of her small town, Simone realized that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The woman who had been pitted and mocked just a month ago was about to become one of the wealthiest people in the state. But first she had some surveying to do. And she had a family that was about to get the shock of their lives. 2 months after her first meeting with Dr. Stone, Simone stood on her inherited land watching a team of professional surveyors set up their equipment around the old oak tree. The morning air was crisp and clear, and the mountains in the distance seemed to sparkle with possibility. Using her grandmother's $50,000 inheritance and a loan secured by the land itself, she had hired the best geological surveying team in the state. Tommy was there too, documenting everything for his graduate thesis and serving as her unofficial advisor on all matters geological. "Miss Davis," called out Rick Morrison, the lead surveyor, "we're ready to begin the core drilling. This first phase should give us a clear picture of what's beneath the surface." For the next week, Simone took vacation days from her teaching job to be present for the surveying work. She watched as the team drilled core samples, conducted soil analyses, and used ground-penetrating radar to map the underground mineral deposits. Each day brought more exciting discoveries. The gold deposits were not only extensive but also easily accessible, located relatively close to the surface compared to most mining operations. Even better, the environmental impact of extraction would be minimal due to the land's location and geological structure. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Stone told her on the 5th day of surveying, barely able to contain her excitement. "Simone, you're looking at approximately $150 million in extractable gold and silver, and that's just from our preliminary estimates. There could be significantly more with deeper exploration." That evening, Simone sat by the spring under the oak tree, Tommy beside her, both of them trying to process the magnitude of what they had discovered. The surveying equipment was quiet now, the workers having returned to town for the night, leaving behind only the ancient silence of the desert. "My grandmother knew," Simone said quietly, running her hands through the grass by the spring. "Somehow, she knew exactly what was under here." Tommy nodded, studying the geological reports by flashlight. "Your great-great-grandfather was incredibly smart too. Look at these maps he drew, they're remarkably accurate. He identified the most promising sites using nothing but observation and intuition." "The question now is what I do with all this," Simone said. "I've never had money, Tommy. I don't know how to be wealthy. I don't know how to handle mining operations or business deals or any of this." Before Tommy could respond, they heard the sound of vehicles approaching across the desert. Car headlights were bouncing toward them through the darkness, not one vehicle but several. As the cars got closer, Simone recognized her sister Denise's luxury SUV in the lead, followed by Rochelle's sedan and two other vehicles she didn't recognize. Her heart began to pound as she realized what was happening. Someone had told them about the gold. The vehicles stopped near the oak tree, and Simone watched as her sisters climbed out, followed by several men in expensive suits. Even in the darkness, she could see the anger and determination on Denise's face. "Simone," Denise called out as she approached, her high heels completely impractical for desert terrain. "We need to talk. Right now." "What are you doing here?" Simone asked, standing up but staying close to Tommy. "What are we doing here?" Rochelle snapped, joining her sister. "The question is, what are you doing here, conducting unauthorized mining surveys on family land?" One of the men in suits stepped forward. "Miss Davis, I'm attorney Bradley Cooper from Cooper, Mills and Associates. I represent your sisters in a legal matter concerning your grandmother's estate." Simone felt a chill run down her spine. "What legal matter?" Denise crossed her arms, her expression cold and calculating. "The legal matter of proving that Grandma Eleanor was suffering from dementia when she wrote that will. No rational person would leave valuable mining rights to just one grandchild." "Mining rights?" Simone asked, though she already knew someone had leaked the surveying results. Attorney Cooper pulled out a thick folder of documents. "Ms. Davis, my clients have reason to believe that your grandmother was not of sound mind when she executed her will. The unequal distribution of valuable assets suggests mental incapacity. We're prepared to contest the will in probate court." "You can't do that," Tommy said, stepping protectively closer to Simone. "The will was legally executed and witnessed." "And who are you?" Rochelle asked dismissively. "Her boyfriend? This doesn't concern you." Another man emerged from one of the vehicles, someone Simone didn't recognize but who carried himself with obvious wealth and authority. "Miss Davis," he said, approaching with a confident smile, "I'm Marcus Webb from Webb Mining Enterprises. I understand you've recently discovered some interesting geological features on your property." "How did you know about the surveying?" Simone demanded. Marcus smiled wider. "Word travels quickly in the mining industry, especially when someone finds deposits of this magnitude. I'm here to make you an offer, a very generous offer that could solve all your legal problems." He handed her a folder containing what appeared to be a purchase contract. I'm prepared to buy your land for $10 million cash with closing next week. That's enough money to set you up for life, and it would eliminate any family disputes about the inheritance. Simone stared at the contract, her mind reeling. $10 million was more money than she had ever imagined having, but she remembered Dr. Stone's estimate of the land's true value, $150 million or more. $10 million, she said slowly. For land worth $150 million? Marcus's smile faltered slightly. Ms. Davis, mining is a complicated and expensive business. There are extraction costs, environmental permits, labor costs, equipment expenses. By the time you subtract all the overhead, $10 million is actually quite generous. Denise stepped closer to her sister. Simone, be reasonable. Take the $10 million and split it 3 ways between us sisters. That's over $3 million each, more money than any of us has ever had. Split it 3 ways? Simone repeated, anger beginning to build in her chest. You want me to share the inheritance that you laughed about, the land you said was worthless? Family is family, Rochelle said coldly. Grandma may not have been thinking clearly, but we can still do the right thing. Simone looked around at the faces surrounding her, her greedy sisters, the opportunistic mining executive, the lawyer prepared to attack her grandmother's memory, and the various hangers-on who had appeared like vultures circling a fresh kill. Then she looked at Tommy, whose face reflected her own anger and determination. Get off my land, she said quietly. Excuse me? Denise asked. I said get off my land. All of you. Right now. Attorney Cooper stepped forward. Miss Davis, I should warn you that we're prepared to file an injunction to stop any further mining activity until this matter is resolved in court. Then I'll see you in court, Simone replied, her voice growing stronger. But right now you're trespassing on private property and I want you gone. Marcus Webb's friendly demeanor disappeared completely. Miss Davis, you should know that if you don't accept my offer, I'm prepared to make other arrangements to acquire this land. There are many ways to convince someone to sell. The threat hung in the desert air like a storm cloud. Tommy moved even closer to Simone, his body tense and ready to protect her. Are you threatening me? Simone asked. I'm educating you about your options, Marcus replied smoothly. This is a dangerous business, mining is. Accidents happen. Legal problems arise. Sometimes it's better to take the smart deal when it's offered. As the vehicles finally disappeared into the darkness, leaving Simone and Tommy alone by the spring, she realized that her battle was just beginning. The land her grandmother had left her was worth a fortune, but claiming that fortune was going to require more courage than she had ever needed in her life. Are you ready for this? Tommy asked, putting his arm around her shoulders as they watched the taillights disappear. I don't know, Simone admitted. But I know one thing. I'm not giving up what Grandma Eleanor left me. Not to my sisters, not to that mining company, and not to anyone else. The old oak tree creaked in the desert wind, and Simone could almost hear her grandmother's voice whispering, sometimes the thing everyone else throws away is the very thing that will change your life forever. The change was coming, but first she would have to fight for it. The courtroom was packed with more people than Simone had ever seen for a probate hearing. News of the gold discovery had spread through their small Nevada town like wildfire, and it seemed like half the community had shown up to witness the legal battle over Eleanor Davis's estate. Simone sat at a table near the front with her newly hired attorney, Sarah Martinez, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s who specialized in estate law and mining rights. Tommy was in the first row behind her, along with Pastor Franklin and several other church members who had come to show their support. On the other side of the courtroom, her sisters Denise and Rochelle sat with their high-powered legal team from Las Vegas. Attorney Bradley Cooper had brought 2 associates and a briefcase full of documents aimed at proving Eleanor Davis had been mentally incompetent when she wrote her will. Judge Patricia Brooks, a distinguished black woman in her 60s, called the court to order. We're here today to address a petition to contest the last will and testament of Eleanor Davis, deceased. The petitioners claim the will was executed while Mrs. Davis was not of sound mind. Attorney Cooper stood up confidently. Your Honor, we will demonstrate that Eleanor Davis was suffering from advanced dementia and was easily influenced by her youngest granddaughter, who manipulated an elderly woman into leaving her valuable assets. Simone felt her face burn with anger and shame. The accusation that she had manipulated her beloved grandmother was like a knife to her heart. Sarah Martinez rose to respond. Your Honor, Eleanor Davis was examined by her physician just 6 months before her death and was declared mentally competent. Mrs. Davis made specific, thoughtful decisions about her estate based on her lifelong knowledge of her family and her property. The first witness called was Dr. Robert Henderson, Eleanor's longtime physician. Attorney Cooper questioned him aggressively about Eleanor's health in her final years. "Doctor, did Eleanor Davis ever complain of memory problems?" Cooper asked. "She mentioned occasional forgetfulness, which is normal for someone in her 80s, Dr. Henderson replied calmly. "Did she ever seem confused or disoriented during her appointments?" "No more than any patient dealing with grief after losing friends her own age." Cooper pressed harder. "Doctor, is it possible that Mrs. Davis was suffering from undiagnosed dementia that could have affected her judgment?" "Anything is possible," Dr. Henderson admitted. "But based on my examinations and conversations with Mrs. Davis, I saw no evidence of cognitive impairment that would affect her decision-making capacity." Sarah Martinez cross-examined skillfully. "Doctor, did Eleanor Davis ever discuss her estate planning with you?" "Yes, several times. She was very specific about her wishes and her reasons for them." "Did she seem confused or uncertain about her decisions?" "Not at all. She was remarkably clear about what she wanted and why. She said she had thought about it for years." The next witness was Carl Mitchell, Eleanor's neighbor and longtime friend. Cooper tried to establish that Eleanor had been isolated and vulnerable to manipulation. "Mr. Mitchell, did you notice any changes in Mrs. Davis's behavior in her final months?" "She seemed more thoughtful, more deliberate about things," Carl replied. "Like she was preparing for something important." "Did you ever see Simone Davis visiting frequently, perhaps pressuring her grandmother?" Carl looked directly at Simone with kind eyes. "Simone visited every week for her whole adult life, just like she always had. Eleanor loved that girl deeply and was proud of who she had become." Cooper's questions continued for over an hour, but he couldn't shake Carl's testimony that Eleanor had been mentally sharp and had spoken often about her estate plans. "She told me once," Carl said during Sarah Martinez's cross-examination, "that she was leaving something special to Simone because Simone was the only one who really understood the family's history and values." The most damaging testimony came from Denise herself. Cooper had her explain how shocked the family had been by the unequal distribution of Eleanor's assets. "Grandma always treated us fairly," Denise testified, her voice breaking with manufactured emotion. "To suddenly leave the most valuable asset to only one grandchild doesn't make sense. It's not like her." Sarah Martinez's cross-examination was devastating. "Miss Davis, how often did you visit your grandmother in the year before she died?" Denise shifted uncomfortably. "I was busy with work and my family." "How often? Once a month? Once a week? Maybe every few months." "Did you ever ask your grandmother about her financial situation or her property?" "Sometimes." "Did you ever express interest in inheriting the desert land specifically?" "Of course not. We all thought it was worthless." Sarah Martinez pulled out a stack of documents. "Your Honor, these are real estate assessments that Ms. Denise Davis ordered on her grandmother's property 3 months before Mrs. Eleanor Davis's death. The assessments specifically valued the desert acreage for potential mineral rights." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Denise's face went pale as Sarah Martinez continued. "Ms. Davis, isn't it true that you had this land assessed because you suspected it might be valuable?" We were just trying to understand Grandma's full estate." "And isn't it true that when the initial assessment suggested possible mineral deposits, you and your sister began pressuring your grandmother to change her will?" Attorney Cooper objected, but the damage was done. The documents showed that Denise and Rochelle had known about the land's potential value before Eleanor's death and had tried to influence her estate planning. The final witness was Pastor Franklin, who testified about Eleanor's mental clarity and her specific conversations about her inheritance plans. "She told me," Pastor Franklin said, looking directly at the judge, "that she was leaving the land to Simone because Simone was the only grandchild who had ever shown real interest in the family's history. She said Simone would understand what to do with it when the time came." Judge Brooks called a recess, and Simone stepped outside the courthouse feeling emotionally drained. The accusations, the family drama, and the public scrutiny were overwhelming. Tommy found her sitting on the courthouse steps, her head in her hands. "How did it become like this?" she asked him. "How did finding gold turn into this nightmare?" "Because money changes people," Tommy replied, sitting beside her. "But it doesn't have to change you." When court reconvened, Judge Brooks delivered her ruling with the authority of someone who had seen too many families destroyed by greed. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, this court finds no credible proof that Eleanor Davis was mentally incompetent when she executed her will. The evidence suggests that Mrs. Davis made thoughtful, deliberate decisions about her estate based on her knowledge of her family and her property. Simone felt tears of relief fill her eyes. Furthermore, Judge Brooks continued, the court notes that the petitioners appear to have had knowledge of the property's potential value before Mrs. Davis's death and may have attempted to influence her estate planning for their own benefit. She looked directly at Denise and Rochelle. The petition to contest the will is denied. The estate of Eleanor Davis will be distributed according to her wishes as expressed in her legally valid last will and testament. As Simone left the courthouse that day, she realized she had won more than a legal battle. She had defended her grandmother's memory and her own integrity. But she also knew that the real challenges were just beginning. Marcus Webb and his mining company were still circling like predators, and having $150 million in gold under her land was going to bring new pressures and new dangers. The legal war was over, but the real battle for her inheritance was just getting started. 3 days after the court victory, Simone was in her classroom preparing lessons for the next week when her principal, Mrs. Roberts, knocked on her door with an unusual expression on her face. Simone, there are some men here to see you, Mrs. Roberts said quietly. They said it's urgent business related to your inheritance. Simone's stomach tightened. She had been receiving calls and visits from various mining companies and investors ever since news of the gold discovery became public, but no one had approached her at work before. In the school's main office, she found 3 men in expensive suits waiting for her. She recognized Marcus Webb from Webb Mining Enterprises, but the other 2 were strangers, both large, intimidating men who looked more like security guards than business executives. Ms. Davis, Marcus said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, I apologize for interrupting your work day, but we need to discuss some urgent developments regarding your property. I told you before, I'm not interested in selling, Simone replied, staying near Mrs. Roberts for safety. That's unfortunate, Marcus continued, because there have been some concerning incidents at mining operations in this region. Equipment sabotage, worker intimidation, environmental protests. It's becoming quite dangerous for independent landowners to attempt their own mining operations. One of the other men stepped forward. Ms. Davis, I'm Jake Morrison from Nevada Security Solutions. Mr. Webb has hired us to provide protection for mining operations in this area. Unfortunately, we can't guarantee your safety if you proceed with independent development of your land. The threat was clear, even though it was delivered in professional language. Simone felt her hands begin to tremble, but she forced her voice to remain steady. Are you threatening me? We're educating you about the realities of the mining business, Marcus replied smoothly. Independent operators face significant risks. Equipment is expensive and vulnerable. Workers can be difficult to find and retain when there are safety concerns. Environmental groups can tie up operations in court for years. Mrs. Roberts stepped protectively closer to Simone. Gentlemen, I think this meeting is over. You need to leave school property immediately. The third man, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. Ms. Davis, accidents happen in mining. Underground collapses, equipment failures, chemical spills. It would be tragic if someone got hurt because proper safety precautions weren't taken. After the men left, Simone sat in her empty classroom trying to process what had just happened. The men from Webb Mining had essentially told her that if she didn't sell her land to them, she would face sabotage, environmental lawsuits, and possibly physical danger. That evening, she drove out to her land to think and to check on the surveying equipment that was still stored near the old oak tree. As she approached the spring, she was horrified to discover that someone had been there before her. The surveying equipment had been vandalized. Expensive geological instruments were smashed, core samples were scattered across the desert floor, and spray paint covered the oak tree with words like, "Sell now," and "Last Warning." Tommy arrived 20 minutes after she called him, bringing Pastor Franklin and 2 other men from the church. They surveyed the damage by flashlight, their faces grim with concern. This is escalating quickly, Tommy said, examining the destroyed equipment. This represents about $200,000 in damage. We need to call the police, Pastor Franklin said. And tell them what? Simone asked bitterly. That some mining company is pressuring me to sell? They'll say it could have been anyone. There's no proof Webb Mining was involved. Carl Mitchell, Eleanor's old neighbor, had driven out to join them after hearing about the incident. He walked around the damaged area with the careful attention of someone who had lived through many difficult situations. Child, he said to Simone, this reminds me of what happened to black farmers in the South back in the day. When someone wanted their land, they'd use intimidation, sabotage, and worse to force them to sell for pennies on the dollar. What am I supposed to do? Simone asked, feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of what she was facing. I can't fight a multi-million-dollar mining company. I can't afford private security or expensive lawyers. Tommy put his arm around her shoulders. You don't have to fight them alone. Over the next hour, as they cleaned up the destruction, Tommy outlined a plan that was both ambitious and risky. Instead of trying to develop the mining operation herself or selling to Web Mining, Simone could partner with an ethical mining company that specialized in environmentally responsible extraction. There's a company called Desert Sun Mining based in California, Tommy explained. They're owned by a black family and they specialize in small-scale, sustainable mining operations. They work with landowners as partners, not buyers. Pastor Franklin nodded approvingly. I've heard of them. Good reputation in the community. They actually hire locally and share profits with the landowners. But would they be willing to stand up to Web Mining? Simone asked. Their CEO is a woman named Dr. Angela Thompson, Tommy said. She's a geologist with a Harvard MBA and a reputation for not backing down from bullies. If anyone can help you develop this land safely, it's her. Carl Mitchell was examining something near the base of the oak tree. Simone, come look at this, he called out. Hidden beneath some fallen branches, someone had left a manila envelope with her name written on it. Inside was a typed note with no signature. Ms. Davis, you have 48 hours to accept Web Mining's offer. After that, your problems will get much worse. This is your final warning. People have disappeared in the desert before. Don't be one of them. The group stood in stunned silence as the implications of the threat sank in. Someone was prepared to use violence to force Simone off her land. That's it, Pastor Franklin said firmly. We're calling the FBI. This has crossed the line from business pressure into criminal intimidation. As they drove back to town in a convoy for safety, Simone realized that her inheritance had put her in genuine danger. Web Mining wasn't just trying to buy her land, they were willing to destroy her life to get it. But she also realized something else. She wasn't alone in this fight. Her church community, Tommy, and people like Carl Mitchell were standing with her. And if Dr. Angela Thompson and Desert Sun Mining were willing to be partners instead of predators, she might have a chance to claim her inheritance and survive the process. The next morning, Simone called Desert Sun Mining's headquarters in California. When Dr. Thompson's assistant heard about the gold deposits and the intimidation Simone was facing, she immediately scheduled an emergency meeting. Dr. Thompson can be in Nevada tomorrow, the assistant said. She's very interested in discussing a partnership, especially when she hears about Web Mining's tactics. As Simone hung up the phone, she felt hope for the first time since the vandalism. Her grandmother had left her more than gold, she had left her a chance to change her family's future forever. But first, she had to survive long enough to claim it. Dr. Angela Thompson arrived in Nevada like a force of nature, a tall, elegant black woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of presence that commanded immediate respect. She stepped out of a luxury SUV accompanied by two associates and surveyed Simone's inherited land with the practiced eye of someone who had built a mining empire from nothing. Miss Davis, Dr. Thompson said, extending a firm handshake, I've heard about your situation with Web Mining. I want you to know that what they're doing to you is both illegal and morally reprehensible. Simone felt immediate relief in the presence of this confident, professional woman who treated her like an equal rather than a victim. Dr. Thompson's associates, a security expert named Michael Rodriguez and a lawyer named Patricia Lee, began documenting the vandalism damage while Dr. Thompson and Simone walked to the spring beneath the oak tree. This is remarkable, Dr. Thompson said, examining the geological reports Tommy had prepared. Your land contains some of the purest gold deposits I've seen in 20 years of mining. But more importantly, the location and geological structure make environmentally responsible extraction not just possible, but profitable. What exactly would a partnership look like? Simone asked. Dr. Thompson pulled out a tablet and began showing Simone detailed plans and projections. Desert Sun Mining would handle all extraction operations, environmental compliance, and marketing. You would retain 60% ownership of all minerals extracted. We would take 40% to cover our operational costs and profit. Simone's eyes widened. Even 60% of the gold deposits would make her one of the wealthiest people in Nevada. We also provide full security for our operations and our partners, Dr. Thompson continued, glancing toward the vandalized equipment. Web Mining's intimidation tactics won't work when you have professional protection and legal backing. Tommy, who had been listening carefully, asked the crucial question, how quickly could you begin operations if Simone agrees to partner with you? We could have extraction equipment on site within 2 weeks, Michael Rodriguez answered. And security personnel would be here within 48 hours. As if summoned by the mention of security, the sound of approaching vehicles interrupted their conversation. 3 black SUVs were driving across the desert toward them, kicking up clouds of dust. "That's web mining," Simone said, feeling her stomach tighten with anxiety. Dr. Thompson's expression hardened. "Mr. Rodriguez, please prepare to document whatever happens here. Ms. Lee, I want you recording everything." Marcus Webb climbed out of the lead vehicle with 4 other men, including the same security personnel who had threatened Simone at her school. But this time, his confident demeanor seemed shaken by the presence of Dr. Thompson and her professional team. "Dr. Thompson," Marcus said with forced politeness, "I didn't expect to see desert sun mining in Nevada." "Mr. Webb," Dr. Thompson replied coolly, "I didn't expect to hear that web mining was using criminal intimidation against independent landowners." The tension was immediate and palpable. Michael Rodriguez had positioned himself protectively near Simone, while Patricia Lee continued recording with her phone. "I don't know what Ms. Davis has told you," Marcus said, "but any problems she's experienced are simply the normal risks of independent mining operations." Dr. Thompson pulled out her own phone and began reading. Normal risks like equipment vandalism? Anonymous death threats? Intimidation at her workplace? She looked up with steel in her eyes. "Mr. Webb, I've been in this industry for 30 years, and I know the difference between business competition and criminal behavior." One of Webb's security men stepped forward aggressively, but Michael Rodriguez immediately moved to intercept him. The desert suddenly felt like it could explode into violence at any moment. "Gentlemen," Dr. Thompson said in a voice that cut through the tension like a blade, "let me be very clear about the situation. Ms. Davis is now under the protection of Desert Sun Mining. Any further intimidation, vandalism, or threats against her or her property will be considered an attack on our company and our interests." Marcus Webb's face flushed with anger. "You can't just waltz into Nevada and interfere with legitimate business negotiations." "I can partner with any landowner who chooses to work with my company," Dr. Thompson replied. "What you apparently can't do is use threats and violence to force people to sell their land." Patricia Lee stepped forward and handed Marcus a legal document. "Mr. Webb, this is a cease and desist order filed this morning in federal court. Any further contact with Ms. Davis or interference with her property rights will result in criminal charges and a federal lawsuit." As Webb and his men realized they were outmaneuvered, Marcus made one last attempt at intimidation. "Dr. Thompson, you're making a serious mistake interfering with our operations in this region. There are consequences to that kind of decision." "Are you threatening me, Mr. Webb?" Dr. Thompson asked with a dangerous smile. "Because unlike Ms. Davis, I have the resources to make your life very difficult if you want to escalate this situation." Michael Rodriguez added quietly, "We have contacts with federal law enforcement who specialize in mining industry crimes. One phone call, and this becomes an FBI investigation." Webb's security team was clearly uncomfortable with how the confrontation was developing. These weren't small-town intimidation tactics. They were facing professional opposition that could destroy their company. "This isn't over," Marcus said as he retreated to his vehicle. "Yes, it is," Dr. Thompson replied firmly. "Ms. Davis is now our partner. Her land is under our protection. Find somewhere else to conduct your business." As the Webb mining vehicles disappeared across the desert, Simone felt like she could breathe freely for the first time in weeks. "Is it really that simple?" she asked Dr. Thompson. "Can you really protect me from them?" "It's not simple," Dr. Thompson replied honestly, "but it's doable. Web mining relies on intimidating people who can't fight back. When they're faced with equal resources and professional opposition, they usually back down." Tommy looked concerned. "What if they don't back down? What if they escalate?" Michael Rodriguez answered, "Then they're looking at federal criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and the kind of media attention that destroys mining companies. Marcus Webb is a bully, but he's not stupid." As they walked back toward the vehicles, Dr. Thompson explained the next steps. Desert Sun Mining would immediately begin the permit process for environmentally responsible gold extraction. Security personnel would be stationed on the property within 48 hours. And most importantly, Simone would begin receiving monthly partnership payments even before full extraction began. "Your grandmother left you more than gold," Dr. Thompson told her as they shook hands to seal their partnership agreement. "She left you independence, security, and the chance to build generational wealth for your family." That evening, Simone sat in her small apartment looking at the partnership contract that would change her life forever. In 6 months she would be receiving monthly payments of over $200,000. Within 2 years she would be a multimillionaire. But more importantly, she had learned that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. When faced with intimidation and threats, she hadn't backed down. When her own family had turned against her, she had found new allies. When powerful people had tried to steal her inheritance, she had fought back and won. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Pastor Franklin. "Simone, child, I just wanted you to know how proud your grandmother would be of you," he said. "You've handled this situation with wisdom, courage, and integrity. Eleanor always said you were special, and now the whole world is going to see why." As Simone prepared for bed that night, she thought about her sisters and their courtroom accusations. They had claimed she manipulated their grandmother for money. The truth was exactly the opposite. Eleanor Davis had manipulated the situation perfectly, leaving her youngest granddaughter not just wealth, but the tools and allies she would need to claim and protect that wealth. The gold in the desert had been waiting for over a century. But Eleanor had been preparing Simone to find it her entire life. 6 months after signing the partnership agreement with Desert Sun Mining, Simone stood in the showroom of a luxury car dealership, trying to process the surreal reality of her new life. The monthly partnership payments had started arriving exactly as promised, $240,000 every month, deposited directly into accounts managed by the financial advisory team Dr. Thompson had recommended. "Miss Davis," the sales manager said with barely concealed excitement, "the Mercedes-Benz S-Class you ordered has arrived. Would you like to see it?" Simone nodded, still feeling like she was living in someone else's life. The car was beautiful, sleek, black with leather interior that smelled like luxury itself. But what struck her most was how differently people treated her now that she could afford to buy whatever she wanted. Tommy walked around the vehicle, shaking his head in amazement. "Remember 6 months ago when you were worried about making rent on your apartment?" "I still am worried about rent," Simone laughed. "Except now I'm worried about the rent on a $8,000 per month penthouse instead of a $800 per month apartment." The transformation in her life had been overwhelming. She had moved from her small apartment to a luxury penthouse downtown. She had quit her teaching job, though she continued volunteering at the school twice a week because she missed working with the children. She had hired a personal assistant, a financial advisor, and a security consultant on Dr. Thompson's recommendation. But the most significant change was in how her community treated her. People who had barely acknowledged her existence before suddenly wanted to be her friend. Local politicians sought her opinions on community development. Charities bombarded her with requests for donations. And her sisters had completely changed their attitude toward her. "Simone," a familiar voice called out as she was leaving the car dealership. Denise was hurrying across the parking lot in designer clothes that had clearly cost more than Simone used to make in a month. "Denise," Simone replied cautiously. Since the court case, her sisters had been sending cards and gifts and making attempts to reconcile, but Simone remained suspicious of their motives. "I was hoping we could have lunch," Denise said with a bright smile that seemed forced. "I know things have been difficult between us, but we're still family." Tommy stepped protectively closer to Simone. Over the past months, he had become not just her friend and advisor, but the person she trusted most in the world. He had refused to accept any money from her, though she had tried multiple times to pay him for all his help. "What do you want, Denise?" Simone asked directly. Denise's smile faltered slightly. "I want to apologize. Rochelle and I were wrong about Grandma's will. We were wrong about the land. We were wrong about you." "You were wrong about a lot of things," Simone agreed. "We'd like to make it up to you," Denise continued. "Maybe we could all invest together in some business opportunities. Pool our resources for the family's benefit." There it was, the real reason for the reconciliation attempt. Now that Simone had money, her sisters wanted access to it. "Denise," Simone said gently but firmly, "I forgive you for what happened in court. But I'm not interested in business partnerships with you." "Why not?" "We're sisters. Sisters who tried to prove I manipulated our dying grandmother. Sisters who called me greedy and dishonest in front of a packed courtroom. Sisters who laughed at my inheritance and then tried to steal it when it turned out to be valuable." Denise's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "That was different. We were protecting the family's interests." "No, you were protecting your own interests," Simone replied. "Just like you're doing now." As Denise walked away in frustration, Tommy put his arm around Simone's shoulders. "That was handled perfectly. You're getting good at seeing through people's motives." "I'm learning," Simone said. "Money certainly reveals people's true character, doesn't it?" That evening, Simone drove out to her land to check on the mining operations. What she found there took her breath away. The desert that had once seemed empty and barren was now bustling with activity, but activity that looked nothing like the destructive mining operation she had imagined. Dr. Thompson had been true to her word about environmentally responsible extraction. The mining site looked more like a high-tech research facility than a traditional mining operation. Solar panels powered the equipment, water was recycled through closed-loop systems, and the natural landscape had been preserved wherever possible. "Miss Davis," called out James Wilson, the site manager Dr. Thompson had hired. "Perfect timing. We just extracted the largest gold sample yet, over 12 pounds of pure gold from this morning's operations." Simone stared at the gleaming metal that had been buried beneath her feet for decades. 12 pounds of gold was worth nearly $250,000, and they were extracting similar amounts almost daily. "How long will the deposits last?" she asked. "At current extraction rates, probably 15 to 20 years, James replied. "Maybe longer if we discover additional deposits in the southern sections of your land. 20 years of monthly payments in the hundreds of thousands of dollars." Simone tried to calculate the total value and gave up. It was more money than she could meaningfully comprehend. Carl Mitchell, Eleanor's old neighbor, had been hired as a local liaison for the mining operation. He approached Simone with a weathered smile and a manila folder in his hands. "Simone, I found something in Eleanor's old papers that I think you should see," he said, handing her the folder. "She left this with me years ago, told me to give it to you when the mining started." Inside the folder was a letter in her grandmother's handwriting, dated 5 years before Eleanor's death. "My precious Simone, if you're reading this, it means the gold has finally been found and you're beginning to understand the full scope of what I've left you. I want you to know that this inheritance comes with responsibilities as well as opportunities. Our family has struggled for generations because we never had the resources to build something lasting. This gold gives you the chance to change that, not just for yourself but for your children and your community. Use this wealth wisely. Invest in education. You've always loved teaching and children. Support other Black families trying to build businesses and create opportunities. Remember that money is a tool, not a goal. And remember that the people who love you when you have nothing are the ones who deserve your trust when you have everything. I'm proud of the woman you've become, and I know you'll use this blessing to make a difference in the world. All my love, Grandma Eleanor." As Simone read the letter by the light of the setting sun, standing next to the oak tree where her family's fortune had been waiting for over a century, she understood that her transformation was just beginning. She had gone from being a struggling teacher to being a multimillionaire. But her grandmother's final letter reminded her that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, it was measured in the positive impact you could have on other people's lives. Tommy read the letter over her shoulder. "So what's the plan, millionaire teacher?" he asked with a grin. Simone looked around at the mining operation, the desert landscape, and the mountains in the distance. "I think it's time to start building something that will last." The girl who had inherited worthless desert land was about to discover that the real treasure wasn't the gold beneath the surface, it was what she could build with it above ground. 1 year after the mining operations began, Simone stood before the Sunset Elementary School's new state-of-the-art computer lab, watching 25 children discover the magic of coding for the first time. The lab was part of the Eleanor Davis Education Center, a $5 million facility she had built to honor her grandmother's memory and provide advanced learning opportunities for children in their small Nevada community. "Miss Simone," called out 8-year-old Jasmine, raising her hand excitedly. "I made the robot move forward." Simone smiled, remembering why she had loved teaching so much. The monthly mining payments now exceeded $300,000, and the financial advisors projected her net worth would reach $50 million within 5 years. But moments like this, watching children discover their potential, remained the most valuable part of her new life. Tommy entered the computer lab carrying architectural plans for their next project, a community center that would provide job training, small business loans, and educational programs for adults. Their partnership had evolved over the past year. He was now the director of the Simone Davis Foundation, the charitable organization she had established to invest mining profits back into the community. "The contractor says the community center should be finished by spring," Tommy said, spreading the blueprints on a nearby table. "The small business loan program is already getting applications from families who want to start their own companies." Pastor Franklin joined them, carrying a folder full of grant applications from other communities across Nevada. Word had spread about Simone's educational and economic development programs, and other towns were requesting similar support. "Child, you've got requests for help from 12 different communities," Pastor Franklin said with pride. "Your grandmother's legacy is reaching farther than she ever could have imagined." As they reviewed the applications, Dr. Angela Thompson arrived with news about the mining operation. Production had exceeded all projections, and Desert Sun Mining was proposing to expand into adjacent land parcels to extend the operation's lifespan. Simone, we've identified potential gold deposits on 3 neighboring properties, Dr. Thompson explained. The landowners are interested in partnerships similar to our arrangement. If we can coordinate the development, we could create the largest environmentally responsible mining operation in the western United States. The expansion would mean even more wealth for Simone, but it would also mean economic opportunities for dozens of other families in the region. It was exactly the kind of community-wide impact her grandmother had envisioned. Let's set up meetings with the other landowners, Simone decided. But I want to make sure they understand what they're getting into and that they have the same legal protections we secured. As the meeting concluded, Simone's assistant, Maria Rodriguez, approached with a concerned expression. Ms. Davis, your sisters are here to see you. They're waiting in the Foundation's main office. Simone sighed. Denise and Rochelle had been making increasingly aggressive attempts to reconnect over the past year, especially as news of her charitable work and business success continued to spread. She had maintained polite but distant relationships with them, but their visits were becoming more frequent and more demanding. In the Foundation office, she found her sisters waiting with what appeared to be a prepared presentation. Denise had a laptop computer and a stack of documents, while Rochelle was dressed in her most professional attorney attire. Simone, Denise began with false enthusiasm, we've developed a business proposal that could benefit all of us and honor Grandma Eleanor's memory. Rochelle opened the laptop to display a PowerPoint presentation titled, Davis Sisters Family Investment Group. The proposal outlined a multi-million-dollar real estate development company that would be funded primarily by Simone's mining profits. We could buy and develop properties throughout Nevada, Rochelle explained. Create jobs, build communities, generate profits for the whole family. It would be a way for us to work together and heal the divisions that have hurt our family. Simone listened politely as her sisters outlined their plan, but she could see through their carefully crafted presentation. They wanted access to her wealth, and they were using family reconciliation as leverage. It sounds like you've put a lot of thought into this, Simone said when they finished. But I'm not interested. Why not? Denise asked, her professional facade beginning to crack. We're your sisters, Simone. We should be building something together. We should be, Simone agreed. But not because I inherited money that you want access to. We should be sisters because we love and support each other unconditionally. Rochelle leaned forward aggressively. We're offering you a way to repair our relationship and create something meaningful for the family. No, you're offering me a way for you to profit from my inheritance, Simone replied calmly. If you wanted a relationship with me, you would have built one during all the years when I had nothing to offer you financially. The conversation grew more heated as her sisters became increasingly frustrated with her refusal to fund their business plans. Finally, Denise played what she clearly thought was her strongest card. Simone, people in town are talking about how you've forgotten where you came from, Denise said coldly. How you've gotten too good for your own family. Is that really the legacy you want? My legacy, Simone replied, standing up to signal the meeting was over, is the Eleanor Davis Education Center where children are learning skills that will change their lives. It's the community center that will provide job training and business loans to families who need opportunities. It's the college scholarships I'm providing to students who couldn't otherwise afford higher education. She walked to the window overlooking the construction site of the community center, where dozens of workers were building something that would serve their town for generations. My legacy is using the wealth I inherited to create opportunities for other people, not to make my sisters richer. As Denise and Rochelle left in frustration, Tommy approached Simone with a gentle smile. You handled that perfectly. It couldn't have been easy. It's getting easier, Simone admitted. I'm learning to see the difference between people who care about me and people who care about my money. That evening, Simone drove out to her land to watch the sunset from the old oak tree by the spring. The mining operation was quiet now, the workers having returned to town for the night. The desert was peaceful, filled with the same silence that had existed there for centuries. Carl Mitchell joined her, as he often did in the evenings. At 72 years old, he had become like a grandfather to her, sharing stories about Eleanor and providing wisdom about handling wealth and family relationships. Your grandmother would be so proud of what you've accomplished, Carl said, settling down beside her in the shade of the ancient tree. But I think she'd be even more proud of who you've remained. What do you mean? I mean you've got more money than most people can imagine, But you're still the same girl who used to visit Eleanor every week just because you loved her. You're still the teacher who cares more about children's futures than your own comfort. Money didn't change your heart, Simone. It just gave your heart more power to make a difference. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Simone reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. A year ago, she had been a struggling teacher living paycheck to paycheck. Now she was a multimillionaire philanthropist whose decisions affected entire communities. But Carl was right. The most important things about her hadn't changed. She still valued education, family, and community service. She still believed in helping others achieve their potential. She still remembered the grandmother who had seen something special in a quiet little girl and had trusted her with a legacy that would last for generations. Tomorrow she would continue building on that legacy. The Eleanor Davis Education Center was just the beginning. The community center would open soon. The college scholarship program was expanding. And the Small Business Loan Fund was already helping families start companies that would provide jobs and economic opportunities for years to come. The woman who had inherited worthless desert land had discovered that the real treasure wasn't gold. It was the opportunity to transform lives, communities, and futures. And she was just getting started. 2 years after the first gold was extracted from her inherited land, Simone stood on the stage of the newly opened Eleanor Davis Community College, looking out at an audience of over 500 people who had gathered for the college's inaugural graduation ceremony. The college was her latest and most ambitious project, a fully accredited 2-year institution that provided free education to students from low-income families throughout Nevada. Among the 68 graduates in caps and gowns were children she had taught in elementary school, adults who had lost jobs and needed new skills, and elderly community members who had never had the chance to pursue higher education. The diversity of ages and backgrounds reflected her vision of education as a lifelong opportunity rather than a privilege reserved for the wealthy. 2 years ago, Simone began her commencement address, people laughed at me when I inherited 500 acres of what they called worthless desert land. They couldn't see beyond the surface to recognize the potential that lay beneath. She paused, looking directly at several graduates whose stories she knew intimately. Maria Santos, a single mother who had earned her nursing degree while working 2 jobs. Robert Chin, a military veteran who had started his own construction company after completing the college's business program. Jennifer Williams, a grandmother who had become a certified teacher at age 65. Today, I want you to understand that you are exactly like that land. Others might look at you and see only challenges, obstacles, and limitations. They might laugh at your dreams or dismiss your potential. But I see what you really are, precious resources waiting to be discovered and developed. Tommy sat in the front row, beaming with pride as he watched the woman he had fallen in love with inspire a new generation of graduates. Their relationship had deepened over the past year, built on shared values and mutual respect rather than wealth or convenience. He wore a simple engagement ring that Simone had given him the previous month, when she had surprised him by proposing during a quiet dinner at the spring beneath the old oak tree. Dr. Angela Thompson was also in attendance, representing Desert Sun Mining's expanded operations throughout Nevada. The success of their partnership had attracted national attention and had led to similar community-focused mining projects in 6 other states. She had become not just a business partner but a trusted mentor who had helped Simone navigate the complexities of wealth and influence. Pastor Franklin delivered the benediction, his voice strong despite his advancing age. The man who had comforted a grieving young woman in a courthouse parking lot now presided over a graduation ceremony that existed because of her generosity and vision. As the ceremony concluded and families gathered to celebrate their graduates' achievements, Simone was approached by a reporter from the Las Vegas Sun who had been covering her philanthropic work. "Miss Davis," the reporter asked, "your foundation has now invested over $25 million in educational and economic development programs. What motivates this level of community commitment?" "My grandmother once told me that true wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you create," Simone replied. "Every graduate we've supported, every small business we've helped start, every child who discovers their potential in our programs represents wealth that will compound for generations." After the interviews and photographs, Simone drove out to her land for the first time in several weeks. The mining operation continued to exceed all projections, generating monthly payments that now exceeded $400,000. Financial advisors projected her net worth would reach $100 million within 3 years. But the money had become secondary to the impact. The Eleanor Davis Foundation now operated in 15 communities across 3 states. The college had a waiting list of over 1,000 students. The small business loan program had helped launch 127 new companies, creating over 800 jobs in rural Nevada. At the old oak tree, she found Carl Mitchell waiting with a familiar manila envelope in his hands. At 74, he remained sharp and energetic, though he moved more slowly than he once had. "Simone, I've got one more letter from your grandmother," he said with a mischievous smile. "She made me promise not to give it to you until the college graduation ceremony." With trembling hands, Simone opened what would be Eleanor's final message to her. "My dearest Simone, if Carl is giving you this letter, it means you've built something even more beautiful than I imagined when I left you that desert land. It means you've discovered what I always knew, that you were meant for something extraordinary. I hope by now you understand that the gold was never the real treasure. The real treasure was watching you discover your own strength, your own vision, and your own capacity to change the world. You've taken what looked like nothing and transformed it into something that will bless thousands of people for generations to come. You've proven that a black woman with a good heart and a determined spirit can overcome any obstacle and achieve any dream. I'm watching from heaven with more pride than words can express. Your parents would be so proud too. You've honored our family's legacy while creating a legacy uniquely your own. Keep building, keep dreaming, keep believing in the power of possibility. And remember that the little girl who used to listen to my stories has become a woman whose story will inspire others for decades to come. All my eternal love and pride, Grandma Eleanor. P.S. Look for the small wooden box buried beneath the eastern roots of the oak tree. That's my wedding ring and your great-great-grandmother's jewelry, the only valuable things our family owned for generations. Now they belong to a woman who has made our family wealthy in every way that matters." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold that reminded her of the precious metal that had changed her life, Simone carefully dug beneath the oak tree's eastern roots. The wooden box was exactly where her grandmother had described, containing jewelry that represented her family's history and struggles across multiple generations. Tommy arrived just as she was examining the delicate necklaces and earrings that had been treasured possessions when her family had very little. He sat beside her in the grass by the spring, understanding without words that this was a moment of profound connection to her heritage. "She planned everything perfectly," Simone said quietly, holding her great-great-grandmother's wedding ring up to catch the last rays of sunlight. "The inheritance, the letters, the timing of every revelation. She knew exactly what I would need and when I would need it." "She also knew exactly who you are," Tommy replied, taking her hand. "The woman who could handle this level of responsibility and opportunity without losing her soul." As darkness fell over the desert, Simone reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. She had begun as a struggling teacher living in a small apartment, worried about paying rent. She had been mocked and dismissed by her own family, threatened by criminals, and challenged by obstacles that seemed insurmountable. But she had also discovered inner strength she never knew she possessed. She had found allies in unexpected places. She had learned to see through people's motivations and protect herself from those who would exploit her kindness. Most importantly, she had used her inherited wealth to create opportunities for others rather than simply accumulating luxuries for herself. The mining operation would continue for at least 15 more years, generating hundreds of millions of dollars in total value. But the true measure of her success would be the thousands of lives changed by the educational programs, business opportunities, and community investments she had created. Her sisters still made occasional attempts to reconcile and gain access to her wealth, but those relationships had healed on Simone's terms. She provided modest financial support when they faced genuine hardships, but she never allowed them to profit from inheritance they had once tried to steal. The community that had once pitted her now celebrated her as a local hero. The mining companies that had tried to intimidate her now sought her as a consultant on responsible development practices. The family that had laughed at her inheritance now watched with amazement as she transformed not just her own life but the lives of countless others. As she and Tommy walked hand in hand back to their car, Simone thought about the children who would graduate from Eleanor Davis Community College in future years, the businesses that would be launched with foundation loans, and the families who would build generational wealth because someone had believed in their potential. The woman who had inherited worthless desert land had discovered that the real treasure was never what lay beneath the surface. The real treasure was what she could build on top of it. And her grandmother's laughter, the last laugh that truly mattered, echoed across the desert like a blessing that would last forever. 5 years later, the Eleanor Davis Foundation had become one of the most successful community development organizations in the western United States. Simone, now married to Tommy and mother to twin daughters named Hope and Faith, continued to split her time between philanthropic work and hands-on education programs. The desert land that had once seemed worthless now supported a thriving community college, a network of small businesses, and a residential development where families could achieve homeownership through innovative financial programs. And sometimes, when the wind blew across the old oak tree by the spring, visitors swore they could hear the sound of gentle laughter, the laughter of a wise grandmother whose greatest treasure had been her faith in a granddaughter's potential. The gold made Simone wealthy, but her heart made her rich.